Chapter 10. The Worst. Jeanette had just been given a new regimen of antivirals. The antibiotics hadn't worked. Like with the antibiotics, Dr. Smith just happened to have some at the office. He pocketed the $50. She didn't get a receipt this time either. Smith was still confused. He didn't know what was affecting Jeanette, but he wanted to give the new medicine some time to work. He knew it was a shot in the dark. He nonetheless reasoned that something was wrong and the antibiotics hadn't worked. So it had to be a virus. What else could it be? He reasoned. Nothing was critical yet, at least in his mind. In John's, however, things were critical. He wanted it over with. He wanted to get a start on his new life, and Jeanette stood in the way. "Good morning, John." John, from time to time, met his neighbor, Phil, on his way to work. It wasn't very often that John and Phil met one another at this hour. John was going to work as late as he possibly could these days to make sure Jeanette and the kids were all right before Maria arrived. "Good morning, Phil. How are you today?" "I'm fine. I haven't seen you, the kids, and Jeanette in a long time. Are you enjoying the summer?" "Yeah, so far so good. Jeanette's a little under the weather. She has been for a couple of weeks now." "That explains it. That's why I haven't noticed you enjoying the pool." "Not this year. There's always next year. It's not going anywhere." "No, it's not. I hope Jeanette is feeling better soon." "Thank you. How's your firm going?" "Pretty well, thank you. This year has been tough, but I'll know in a couple of days just how bad. I'm hoping we've survived this slump." "I'm sure you have. I have to be going. I have to get to work." "See you later," Phil said, getting into his car to leave. "See you later. Have a good day." John did the same and left for work. He was going to spend a little time in the office this morning. He wanted to get the estimate in the mail today. He would call the Musiacs later today and let them know they could expect it soon. He pumped his fist as he backed out of the driveway. There was no way John could have known his chance encounter with his neighbor had worked in his favor. The conversation, as brief as it was, would only corroborate his story and keep the coroner at bay. Suspicious deaths always underwent an autopsy by law, where a needle mark would surely be found. John had lucked out. His neighbor now knew Jeanette wasn't feeling well. To further corroborate his story and avoid an autopsy was the fact that she had been to the doctor's office twice now. If he had known things were going so well for him, he would have been delighted, but he didn't know. He hadn't thought everything out. The mission he was on occupied too much of his mind. He hadn't thought everything through. He just wanted to rid himself of Jeanette. John sat at his desk after getting a coffee from the vending machine. He needed to get the Musiac's bid out. He looked it over one more time, only to arrive at the same place. It was a decent-sized job and required a good deal of indoor work. He had a good feeling. He felt this job was the beginning of a turnaround for JT's. He had prepared it so that he could get back to running the firm while at the same time slashing any profit margin on the job next to zero. John wasn't trying to make money on the job. He was trying to keep JT's in business. and he had a good feeling about this one. Jeanette had just started taking antivirals. She had just been to see Dr. Smith, and much to his chagrin, the antibiotics hadn't done anything to fix her. She was still feeling faint, tired. Headaches had become the norm. Her digestive system was off. The trembling was getting worse. She spilled her coffee or tea more frequently. Smith was at a loss. If the antivirals did nothing to clear it up, he'd have to resort to more drastic diagnostic means. He would have to use all the tools available to him, but he was optimistic. He felt the antivirals would work. Johnny and Tammy hadn't been told about their parents' marital problems, and nor had Maria. Jeanette's well-being had taken center stage. The family had been forced to focus on her and her well-being. Even the children were concerned at this point. Even though they had absolutely no understanding of what could have been possibly wrong, they knew their mother wasn't feeling well, despite her efforts to keep it from them. Jeanette had made a Herculean effort to keep her illness from the kids, but it was obvious even to them. It was just too hard to hide it, so the kids knew. Another way to put it would be to use the word impossible. John had gotten the Musiac's bid out. John had left the office, put it in the mail, and went to the roofing job they had just started. One day had been enough to make it look as though the work had started earlier, even if it hadn't. The scaffolding was up, shingles had been removed, and new ones had been put in their place. JT's crew was relaxing on the front lawn. It was another scorcher of a day. Even Bob had sweat on his brow. "I wonder when this weather is going to break. It makes it tough," John said. "It sure does." Jim wasn't joining in the conversation. He just sat in the shade, eating his lunch, dreading his return to the roof where the sun would beat down on him some more. "I have to make a phone call to the Musiacs. I want to let them know that the bid is in the mail. They could receive it as early as tomorrow. Let's keep our fingers crossed." "Fingers?" John said with a laugh. "Cross your fingers, toes, anything you've got. Here goes." Wiping his face one more time, John stood up and moved a few steps away. He took his phone out of his pocket. "Hi, Mr. Musiac? It's John Travers. How are you today?" "I'm fine. I just called to say I got your bid out today. Would you be able to start soon? We have 2 roofing jobs on the grow, but if we could start inside, we'd be able to start right away. We're anxious. We want to get this going. We've done our homework. How much are you charging?" "The total cost of the job will be $16,500 plus materials." "That's good. We're not going to make much money on the job, but it'll keep us in business." This was music to his ears. Mr. Musiac cared a lot about the local economy, and he was prepared to put his money where his mouth was. "You could start right away?" "Right away." "Well, John, I don't need to see the bid. If it's $16,500 plus materials, you've got it." A broad smile came to John's face. Bob noticed it. "That's great news. I'll sign the bid, but let's get started now." "It's a deal. I'll get on it today. Rest assured, Mr. Musiac, you won't be sorry. JT's may do the best work in town. Goodbye." And John hung up the phone. "We've got it," Bob exclaimed. "We did. We start right away. We're doing the indoor work first. That'll give us time to finish up on these 2 jobs. I'll have to hire some more indoor help. For the rest of the day." John was distracted. The Musiac work had given him the opportunity to turn JT's around. He was excited. This was the break he was looking for. He still needed to find more work, but the Musiacs had lessened the urgency. He needed to get ready. His mind wandered to what JT's needed to do to pull this one off. The obvious hole to him was hiring the expertise needed to complete the job successfully. He would get on that later today. He had to make sure Bob didn't have any contacts. John arrived home just before 6 in the evening. Jeanette was again curled up on the couch. He looked at her and nodded his head. He had a hard time accepting that he was doing this to her. But she shouldn't have done what she did. We all had to pay for our actions, and she was paying for hers now. His entrance disturbed her. She looked up from the couch. "Hi, how are you?" "I'm fine. How are you feeling today?" "Horrible." "Give the antivirals a chance. It was just yesterday." "I know. I will. I just hope they work." "They will," he lied. "I got some good news today." "What's that?" "We got that Musiac job," he answered with a broad smile. "It's what we needed. We're back on track." Jeanette wished she was as happy as him, but she wasn't. It only reminded her of the situation they were in, one she didn't want to be in. Their marriage was coming to an end because she hadn't controlled her impulses. The thought of what she had done repulsed her. The thought of Jean-Paul repulsed her. Although she couldn't realize it or feel it, her sickness had acted in her favor. The kids didn't know. Maria didn't know. The whole household was busy concerning themselves with her and her recovery, not her marital situation. It was the last thing on their minds. Doing everything to sound excited, she said, "That's good. When do you start?" "Right away. Would you like something to eat? I'll prepare it." "I should eat something." "Yes, you should. I'll prepare some stew for you. Do you want coffee? Tea?" "I'll have some tea, please." John went to the kitchen and started to make some dinner for Jeanette. He would prepare some for himself as well. "Just stay there and relax. I'll get it." Jeanette's eyes closed. John knew what he had to do, and he was running out of time. Once the antivirals ran out, it would look harder to find out exactly what was afflicting Jeanette. They would start performing the whole gambit of tests at their disposal, and John wanted it finished before they got to that stage. That gave him only to the end of the week, but it was easier procrastinating than doing it. He had plenty of death camas, but he didn't know how to extract the zygazine for injection. He'd spend some time tomorrow figuring this out. He'd pick up syringes too. Everything was falling into place. JT's was on the mend, and Jeanette wasn't. Bob, I was hoping you'd get back to the office this afternoon. Do you think the two of you can handle it? Of course. We can handle it. Okay, I'll leave at lunch. John stopped at a pharmacy on the way back to the office. He picked up a package of syringes. They had various sizes. John got the 100 ml one. This meant he would have to inject her twice just to be sure. It wasn't small. When he was a kid, he used it as a squirt gun. He still needed to know how he could extract the zygazine from the plant and get it into injectable form. But he had all afternoon to figure this out. He didn't think it could be too difficult. He nonetheless had no idea. His afternoon turned out to be productive. He had the syringe. He knew how he could extract the zygazine from the death camas. Now all he needed was the courage to do it. He would have to start tonight. He needed to start the extraction. First, he would pulverize it all, dissolve it, and start. He needed to cook it for a good 20 hours and then start concentrating it. John found that finding the courage was the hardest part of what he was doing. The extraction and the concentration was easy. He could do it in the garage. He knew it would go unnoticed from there. Jeanette would be on the couch, and the kids would be busy downstairs watching television. He got home at about 5, supper time for the kids. Marie had just left, but not before preparing something for the children. It was on the stove. "Hi, Jeanette, I'm home." She lifted her head from the couch and said, "Hi." Maria prepared some dinner for the kids. "I'll just settle in, then I'll feed them." "Are you going to join us?" "I don't think so. I'm just going to stay here on the couch." "That'd be fine. You should get your rest. I'll feed the kids. I'll join them when they eat. I wish I felt well enough to join you too, but I don't. Don't worry about it. Just stay there and get some sleep. I'll prepare a little something for us, too. I'll let you know." "Okay, you're sweet." John didn't think he was being so sweet. He was killing her, after all. He put the bag of syringes on the counter, got himself a drink, and called the children. They came upstairs, and John fed them. They enjoyed his company. When he was at the table, it made them feel more grown up. That was why he even did it. Immediately upon finishing their dinner, the children excused themselves and went downstairs to watch more television. That's something I'll get under control. But first, I'd better focus on Jeanette. It was only 5:30, so he still had plenty of time to grind the death camas up. He went to the garage and started. He started tearing at the plants. He wasn't particular at all. He broke up all the plants, managing to get them in the half a dozen garbage bags he'd gotten out. Now, he just needed to grind them into a powder. But first, he'd prepare some dinner for himself and Jeanette. He swept the garage floor and moved the bags to one corner. Jeanette returned immediately to the couch when she finished dinner, where she curled up tightly, shivering. She wasn't well. She didn't look well. "It'll be over soon. Real soon." John mumbled under his breath, turning his head to see her feebly put her feet up. Jeanette was asleep in no time. John went back to the garage. Now he had to pulverize the plant. He could only do it bit by bit, so he started. It took him almost 2 hours, but now he had 1 or 2 shovels full of ground up death camas he wanted to cook at low heat for a day. He had to get it into solution. It may have been overkill on his part at this stage, but he wanted to be sure. He still had a few days. It wasn't critical yet. He took out the small hot plate he had put in the garage and plugged it in. He went inside to get a large pot from the kitchen. Jeanette was sound asleep on the couch. He went over to wrap the blankets even tighter. He wanted to make her comfortable. He didn't like what he was doing. For the life of him, he couldn't understand why she had done it. Damn her, he thought, and went to the kitchen. He got 2 jugs of bottled water too. He emptied the death camas into the pot and added enough water to fill it to the top. The mixture reminded him of a thin stew. Moving the hot plate and pot from the wall, John left it simmer. He went through the door that led inside, being sure to lock it after he'd gone through. Jeanette still laid on the couch, wrapped in a blanket when John entered the living room. He looked down at his watch and then at her again. He went over to the couch and woke her. "Come on, Jeanette. It's time for bed." She looked up. Her eyes darted around the room. Slowly, they came to rest right in front of her. "Okay, thanks," she said, struggling to get to her feet to go upstairs to bed. "Good night." "Good night," she mumbled as she stumbled across the living room floor until she could put her hand out for support on the hand railing leading upstairs. John had watched her as she had made her way to the stairs. He still was. He lowered his head. His look went to the floor. He sighed and shook his head in disbelief. John had a good night's sleep. He was used to sleeping on a mattress on the floor. This was soon to be his 4th week. His watch sounded. He often got up at this hour so he could relax, have coffee, read the newspaper, and have a little breakfast before going to open up JT's. He did this around 6 times a week. His dream was to get back to it 5 times a week. And with the new job, the Musiacs, he was a lot closer than he thought. In fact, he hadn't even had time to let the implication for JT sink in. With everything that was going on in his life, he couldn't be blamed, could he? After showering and getting ready for the day, John went downstairs to make coffee. He reached out the front door to get the newspaper. He hoped there was something of interest, but it was in the middle of the summer, so he didn't have a lot of hope for the sports section. Jeanette was still in the bedroom, sound asleep. John was used to leaving for work long before she would get up. He made sure the kids were up and about, and that Maria was there, or soon to be there. She was coming in as early as possible these days. It also meant she normally left a little bit earlier. But the new schedule worked for all of them, and she was happy to make the adjustment for Jeanette's sake. Her flexibility made the whole family happy. John drank his coffee reading the newspaper. He was right. The sports section was a little thin on anything of interest. John had been a sports fan for his entire life. His favorite sport was hockey, but he watched them all with fervor. He had his favorite teams, and when they won, he was inevitably happy. He took a swig of coffee and went to the garage to see how his stew was doing. It had gotten thinner. John didn't understand how it had done it, but it pleased him. He put the wooden spoon in and stirred it. The death camas appeared to have gone into solution a lot better overnight. This made John happy. It was thin enough that he felt he could inject it into Jeanette without too much bother. He stirred it again and went back inside to finish his coffee and read the newspaper. The kids would be stirring any minute now. They immediately went downstairs anyway. All John had to do was wait for Maria. John looked down at his watch. The last few weeks had taken their toll on John, and he had been going as if there hadn't been any emotional toll whatsoever. He was poisoning his wife. His life, as he knew it, was changing right in front of his eyes. JT's in the city of Sudbury had been going through a long economic downturn, and the recovery had appeared elusive until recently. The city showed signs of recovery, and with the Musiac contract, so did JT's. He recognized this as he sat and drank his coffee. He wondered if Bob and Jim could handle the roof today. He was due for some time off. This would be his first day off in over a year. What time is it? He wondered. It was too early to call Bob, but he had already decided he would take the day off. The stew, if you could call it that at this stage, was on his mind. There was some commotion upstairs. Johnny and Tammy must have been getting up. They were. Looking like they had just woken up, they joined their father at the kitchen table. Conversation wasn't their strong point at this time in the morning, so John greeted them. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Yes, Daddy," they replied. "Did you want some juice?" "Yes, please," they answered in unison and matter-of-factly. John went to the refrigerator and poured them both a glass and put them on the table in front of them. "Maria should be here soon. Your mother is still asleep. We'll let her sleep. We always do." "You do, Johnny. We recognize that. We appreciate it, too." Children were young, but their mother's sickness affected them, too. Johnny asked, "Is Mum going to be okay?" "Your mother's very sick, but she's going to the doctor. He put her on some new medicine just 2 days ago." "It has been a long time." "I know it has. Let's hope the new medicine works and your mother starts to feel better." "What's on television?" John asked, hoping to change the subject. The kids finished their juice and immediately went downstairs to turn television on. It worked. Kids had a new focus. John's mind was preoccupied. Today was the day he was going to kill Jeanette. Everything was going to change. The very essence of what had defined him was going to change. He was no longer going to be a successful young businessman with a family to be envied, a pretty wife with 2 wonderful children, a couple who seemed to light up the room at whatever event they were at. Now he was going to be seen as a widower, someone people would feel sorry for. He didn't need their sympathy. Jeanette had asked for it. She had an affair with Jean-Paul, a jock from Lifestyles in his mind with nothing to offer. Why had she done it? He didn't know. But she had. It was too much for him to take. Everything had been put in motion. The doctor was confused. He was taking shots in the dark. It had to be today or tomorrow before his perfect crime could fall apart. The medical community would look much harder at what was afflicting Jeanette soon. And he didn't want that at all. He wanted what he had been doing, poisoning his wife, to end now, while it would be assumed she had died of natural causes. It would be assumed she had been overcome from some unknown cause. It was highly unlikely that an autopsy would be ordered. If he did his job and injected her with the concoction he was now brewing in a discreet, under her hair, came to his mind, place, he would get away with it. A car pulled to the front of the house. Maria was here. "Good morning, Maria. How are you today?" "I'm fine. Is Jeanette feeling any better?" "I don't know. She's still asleep." "I hope those antivirals work." "So do I," he answered, knowing they wouldn't. "I think it's best to let her sleep." "So do I. Are the children downstairs?" "Yes, they are. The television is on." Maria chuckled. It didn't take much to entertain the kids. All you had to do was put them in front of the television, and it took care of everything else. "Would you like a coffee, Maria?" "I'm not going into work today." She was surprised. This wasn't like John at all. Was he feeling for her? She wondered. "I'd love a coffee. Then I'll have to get started. The house can use some dusting." "Do you know what the weather will be like today?" "They're calling for more of the same. I'll take the kids out to the pool later on. They'll like that. I have some work to do in the garage today, so I'll be spending a lot of time there." "Okay, enjoy your day off." "I will." Looking down at his watch, he added, "I have to call Bob. Make sure everything is all right. It never ends." No, it doesn't. Maria took her coffee and went to join the children downstairs. Her day had begun. So had John's. John called Bob. He wasn't happy, but accepted it. He worried about finishing the job on time. He fully understood why John was doing this. He had a job to do nonetheless. He had to figure out how this would affect their progress. Bob didn't want it to affect their progress at all, but he had to check. It was a very difficult time for John. He was about to poison his wife. He was about to kill her. The death canvas was boiling away. He had taken the day off. Nothing was normal for John. Everything he was doing was inconsistent to those who knew him best. But that only left two people, Jeanette and Bob. John was nevertheless committed. He was going to take the day off, and he was going to kill Jeanette. These things had become obsessions for him, and as inconsistent as it was going to happen. He went to the garage and peeked inside where he could see the death canvas simmering away on the hot plate. He turned the light on and opened the garage door. The morning air filled the garage. John could already tell it was going to be another hot day. He thought about Bob and Jim, and the sun beating down on them as they did their best to finish the roof. I wish I could be there to help them, but I can't. I have to do this first, he thought, as he removed the lid from the pot. What had started as a full pot had boiled down to half a pot. What remained wasn't extremely viscous, as John had worried. It was injectable. It was a little bit cloudy, but otherwise clear. These were all things he had guessed about, and to his surprise, he couldn't have asked for a better outcome. He didn't exactly know what percentage of the plant was in solution, but it didn't matter. He would use it to make some tea, then he would inject her a number of times. He'd make sure he administered enough to kill her. In his rough calculations, and from what he had found out, John knew that Jeanette would have to eat more than what he considered possible. Injection reduced the amount by more than 98%. He figured he had to inject her with about 100 milligrams of the solution. He could do this, but first he'd make tea for her using the boiling solution. He felt she would get really sick drinking the tea to the point where she would fall asleep. He would then inject her. He was going to inject her twice, just to be sure. Jeanette had gotten up and made it to the couch. There she laid down and started her day as she had for the past 2.5 weeks. She wrapped a blanket tightly around her body and closed her eyes. "Jeanette," John said, walking through the living room, "do you want a cup of coffee?" "Yes, please," she answered feebly. "I'll make it for you. Just relax. The antivirals still haven't had time to work. I hope you're right. I'm getting tired of this. Really tired of it." John went to the kitchen and made Jeanette a coffee. He put a couple of teaspoons of energy spice in it. "I can bring it to you on the couch if you'd like." "No, thank you. I'll join you." Jeanette slowly got up off the couch. She looked terrible. There was no sparkle in her eyes. There was no smile on her face. Instead, it was replaced by what could only be described as a frown. She made her way to the kitchen table, obviously struggling. She massaged her forehead the whole time she walked over. Her balance was off. John stood and pulled a chair out for her. "Have you told the children about what we're doing?" Jeanette asked. "No, I haven't. I've been waiting for you to get better. They don't need to know that their mommy and daddy are splitting up. It's going to be hard for them as it is. I want you to be on top form before we tell them. John, we don't have to let what I did end everything," Jeanette said, almost pleading. "We've had this discussion before, and we have to. What you did is absolutely contrary to my beliefs and what marriage means, to what it should be. There will always be temptations. It's up to us to fight temptations. That's what marriage is." Jeanette's eyes sank. She had asked for this. There was no point in trying to reconcile what had recently happened. What she had done had devastated him, and she could only hope he would have a change of heart as they moved forward in going their separate ways. That was their only hope in her mind. Little did she know what was in store for her. John was taking drastic, irreversible action because of what she had done. His ego dictated the course of action he was taking, and there was certainly no way it could be stopped now. They quietly sat next to one another, drinking their coffees. John looked at Jeanette. She looked sick. He'd been putting enough death camas in her food and drinks as he thought he could possibly get away with, and so far it had worked for him. She in no way suspected anything, nor did Dr. Smith. Now he had the neighbors' collaboration as well. Jeanette had been to the doctor. He had first prescribed antibiotics, but they hadn't worked. So now she was on a regimen of antivirals. John knew, but she didn't because she had no way to, that the antivirals wouldn't work either. In John's mind, though, it didn't matter. It would all be over soon. He didn't know how the children would react, but he felt they would accept Jeanette's death much better than an adult would. They were only children after all. The day went by as the days had since Jeanette had taken ill. Most of the day was spent downstairs by the children watching their favorite television shows. Maria made sure they were all right. She fed them and prepared an early dinner for them. The kids were now used to this. They no longer expected to eat with their parents. They knew their mother was sick and were well behaved enough to know that any complaints they made would go unnoticed. A polite way of saying ignored. Their complaints had several times been dismissed. John had spent most of the day between the house and the garage. He had even managed to get the pot of death camas on the stove for a few hours. Now it was in the refrigerator, cooling. Jeanette was asleep on the couch. The kids had eaten and were now downstairs as John made stew spiked with death camas for his wife. Maria had left about half an hour ago. Putting his hand on her shoulder, John gently woke Jeanette from a deep sleep, saying, "Jeanette." She didn't stir, so he shook her harder. "Honey, wake up. It's time to get something to eat." "Thank you. I'll be right there." He went back to the kitchen and filled a plate full of the stew for Jeanette and put it on the table where it waited for her to arrive. She slowly made her way to the table. He watched her and couldn't help thinking how pathetic she looked. She wore no makeup. Her hair certainly looked like it had been slept on. It wasn't brushed. She had just pushed it out of her face. She wore heavy woolen socks with her sweatpants. Looking down, he sighed. He had a hard time believing what he was doing as he watched a woman he used to think was beautiful, vibrant, and a good mother to their children make her way with difficulty to the kitchen table. He pulled her chair out so she could sit. She didn't even thank him this time. She just sat in the chair, her shoulders slumped. "Can I get you tea? Coffee? Something else?" "A cup of tea would be nice. I'll make it for you. Those antivirals should work soon. I wouldn't be surprised if you woke up tomorrow feeling much better." "I hope so, because I'm feeling horrible." Tea should help you sleep tonight. I'll add another spoonful of honey to it. John went to the counter, put a bag of chamomile tea in the pot, added 2 teaspoons of honey, and more or less filled the pot with the extracted death camas he had made. He filled the rest of the pot with water. The viscosity was good. There must have been half the lethal dose of the plant in there. It would surely put her to sleep, and poison her enough to put her soundly asleep, he thought. An evil smile came to his face as he brewed the tea. She won't even know what hit her, he snorted under his breath. Why don't you move to the couch? I'll bring your tea there. Okay, I will. Thanks. Get as comfortable as you can. I'll be right there, he said, taking a spoon from the cutlery drawer to stir the tea steeping in the cozy on the counter. He took the spoon and gave it a good stir. He poured a coffee cup full and brought it to her. Here, take this. It'll make you feel better, I hope. Me too, she softly moaned. Are you going to join me? I think I will, but I'm going to have a rum and coke. Okay, dear, absently came out of her mouth. John turned quickly, and as fast as he could, he made a rum and coke. He couldn't control his sense of urgency. He desperately had to prevent her from nodding off. Not before the tea. He plopped himself down in the chair next to the couch, which she sat on, holding her teacup between her hands. I did it. She didn't nod off. She's still awake. Drink up, Jeanette. A good night's sleep can only help. Don't worry. If you get too drowsy, I'll take you to bed. Thank you, John. That's sweet. Sweet? He wondered. Wasn't a word he would have used. She was in worse shape than he had imagined, anticipated. Under the circumstances, what she had said didn't make sense. He concluded that the poison must have caused her to become delirious. Here's to you feeling better. Thanks. And she took a big gulp. For the next half an hour, John focused on Jeanette drinking the tea. Every chance he got, he encouraged her to drink more of his concoctions, always promising her that she would feel better for it in the morning. He twice repeated he would make sure she comfortably got to bed. For whatever reason, his repeated reassurances comforted her. She drank up. After about 20 minutes, Jeanette began to nod off. Jeanette, let me take you upstairs. I'll make sure the kids get to bed soon. Okay, honey. Honey? Again? But he wasn't going to be deterred. He had to get her to bed upstairs. He ran to the kitchen where he was heating the solution of death camas on low. He wanted the solution to be at body temperature. It was, so he turned it off. Johnny, Tammy, it's going to be bedtime after this show. They looked at one another, nodded their heads in acceptance, and called back, Okay, let us know. Just before making sure the kids went to bed, John made himself another drink. Am I losing my nerve? He wondered. The kids were in bed and all tucked in. It didn't take the children long to fall asleep. John had to get to work. Checked the temperature of the death camas. It was right. He got the syringe out, He put the death camas solution in a container and went upstairs to his bedroom. Jeanette was fast asleep. He put the poison beside her on the floor. He looked down at her. He remembered the good times they together had shared. He looked down at the woman he was about to kill, his wife, and the mother of his children. He snapped his head. He was doing everything in his power to muster the courage to carry on with his plan. He turned away from her and took a deep sigh. Abruptly, he turned to face her. He shook her. She was fast asleep. John had decided to inject her 3 times in the back of the neck, under her hair, just at the hairline. According to his calculations, injecting her with 2 syringes full meant he would be injecting her with twice the lethal dose. His hands shook as he filled the syringe. He stuck it in and squeezed it until it was empty. That's 1. Just 1 more to go. He bent down, filled the syringe again, lifted her hair, and injected her again in the same spot. He went to the bathroom to get a cotton ball and a bandage to absorb any blood that might come out. He would take the bandage off once the leaking was all over. He had plenty of time. Now, all that was left to do was to clean up after himself. So he did that and went downstairs to his rum and coke, which was still waiting for him. He snatched it off the table, went to a comfortable chair in the living room, and plopped himself down. He stared aimlessly at the floor. He wasn't focusing on anything in particular except for what he had just done. He had just killed his wife.